And then Zoom will catch up here in a second and tell me how many people are waiting. I'm promoting Nancy to a panelist, Robert.
Yes.
Don't.
Oh, yes.
Not
I'm
Jen.
Yes.
What does she have to do?
Right. You're on. Not seeing Valerie yet, but we do have a quorum. I'm recording in the room. And she has not emailed me, so I think we should start the meeting when you're ready.
All right, I am ready. I'm calling to order this May 13th meeting of the Mountain View Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee. We will start with roll call.
Member Adamic,
Here.
member Chair Stone,
Here.
Vice Chair Barton,
Here.
member Kuzamal.
Present.
Okay, and if we do get member Fenwick, I need to read this. She's here. Fantastic. Member Fenwick is attending remotely pursuant to Government Code Section 54953, subsection F, subsection 2, subsection A, subsection I. For your information, the provisions of this clause shall not be used by any member of the legislative body for more than 2 meetings per calendar year. Additionally, the government code requires individuals participating virtually to identify anyone over 18 in the room with them while they are attending and their relationship to this member. Member Fenwick, is there anyone in the room with you?
There is not at this time, but I am in a shared space with my husband, Mark Fenwick, and he may pass through, but he will not hear the audio as I am on an AirPod.
Okay, thank you very much. We're in accordance with law and all members are present and accounted for.
Thank you. We will now move to item 3, oral communication from the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved to persons wishing to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. State law prohibits the committee from acting on any non-agendized items. Recently, regional, local elected and appointed bodies have been subjected to disruptive, racist verbal attacks by anonymous callers during virtual public comments. The city of Mountain View is fully committed to racial, religious, and cultural equity and justice, and we strive to create a welcoming and safe and inclusive community for all. This advisory body, or this commission, we're an advisory body.
Yes.
Welcomes respectful and non-threatening public comments regarding matters over which the advisory body has jurisdiction. Comments deemed otherwise pursuant to Council Code of Conduct and Government Code may be grounds for immediately terminating a speaker's comment period. Are there any members of the public wishing to address the committee on non-agendized items? If so,
Not at this moment.
nobody online.
Nobody on.
Okay. Then we will move on to item number 4, which is the consent calendar. The consent calendar consists of 2 items. These items will be approved in bulk unless any member of the committee wishes to pull an item. Would any member like to remove an item from the consent calendar? Seeing none, then the next step is committee clarifying questions. Does anyone have any clarifying questions on the consent calendar items? We'll move on to public comment. Is there any public comment on the consent calendar items?
No.
Seeing none, then we will move on to committee comments. Does any member of the committee wish to make any comments about the consent calendar items?
Is this the point at which motion would be? in
This
order?
was the point at which a motion would be in order.
All right. I would move to approve the consent calendar. I feel like I'm supposed to read out the full name of or the full titles of each thing. But I'm not sure if that's the case.
I think we're okay.
Okay, good. Then I would move to approve the whole consent calendar, which is meeting minutes and the trail counting item.
Member Fennick, I second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
I,
Motion passes unanimously. Then we will move on to our new business, starting with item 6.1, the fiscal year 2024-2025 capital improvement program. We have a presentation.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and committee members. I'm Joy Houghton, Senior Civil Engineer in Public Works, and I'm joined tonight by Robert Gonzalez, Principal Civil Engineer. We're here to provide the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee an overview of the Capital Improvement Program, or CIP, and obtain the BPAC's input to guide staff in the preparation of the recommended fiscal year 2024-25 CIP. For background, the Capital Improvement Program, or CIP, is a critical planning tool to maintain and improve the city's capital infrastructure. It is on a biennial planning process where every other year is development of a 5-year CIP, and the off years are primarily focused on the second year scheduled projects identified in the previous 5-year CIP, or what we refer to as roll forward projects. Fiscal year 2024-25 is the second year of the planning cycle, and review is focused on the following types of projects. Projects that are scheduled to roll forward for funding in fiscal year 2024-25, modifications to some roll forward projects, amendments to existing projects, and a limited number of new projects. The CIP has 2 components: non-discretionary, which are annual and periodic maintenance and repair projects, and discretionary, which are projects not fitting the non-discretionary description. There are currently 336 active projects, of which 141 are non-discretionary and 195 are discretionary. 40 of those active CIPs involve pedestrian and bicycle improvements. Recognizing the interest in bicycle and pedestrian improvement projects, the next 2 slides will summarize the general status of these projects and provide how they relate to Vision Zero Action Plan, Local Road Safety Plan, and Safe Routes to School. Of the 40 CIPs involving bicycle and pedestrian improvements, 9 CIPs are in construction phase, including the SB1 Streets project, Fairchild and Leon, the Colony Street connection to Permanente Creek Trail, and street reconstruction of Park and Sonia Drives. 25 of those CIPs are in design phase, of which 7 will start construction in 2024, including the Sterling Road bicycle and pedestrian improvements, Miramonte Avenue improvements, and California Complete Streets. I'd like to mention that the scope for both Miramonte and California Streets projects were expanded, resulting in need for additional funding, also further constraining available funding for new projects. But I'm happy to report that both projects are moving forward and will start construction this year. 11 of those 25 CIPs will start construction in 2025, including the East Wisman Area Transit-Oriented Development Improvements, Phase 2 on Ellis Street, the Shoreline Boulevard bus lane and utility improvements, and the Grant Sleeper intersection improvements. In looking at how the 40 CIPs relate to the Integrated Vision Zero Action Plan and Local Road Safety Plan and Suggested Routes to School, please note that 16 of the projects are located on the high injury network. 25 projects are at locations with known collision history between 2014 and 2019. 38 projects are applying known proven safety measures for collision type, and 20 projects are along suggested routes to school. The one project that is not at these types of location is the MTC Mobility Hub, which will install micro mobility park and charge charging ports for electric bikes and scooters, a bicycle fix-it station, and new bike racks to improve the bike room at the Mountain View Transit Center. As a brief overview of the funding sources, the city CIP is funded from various sources, which are broken into the 5 categories shown on the screen, each with specific parameters on how they may be used. The most flexible funds that generally can be used on any type of capital project are the unrestricted funds, making them extremely valuable. As a summary, for the unrestricted funds, the available fund balance is 25% less than the previous year. For enterprise funds, the water fund is reduced due to inflation and cost increase combined with reduced water consumption. Transportation funds, in addition to the unrestricted funds, the transportation funds are also used for active transportation projects. The transportation funding has declined from the last year, and staff expects funding to remain at the current levels. Gas tax specifically has been impacted by the new hybrid work trends. The Shoreline Regional Park Community Fund balance is higher this year due to staff not programming high levels in previous year. The intent was to set aside a majority of the 2023-24 balance for several future year CIPs in the North Bay Shore. As for developer fees and charges, development activity is substantially reduced due to the economic downturn. One factor that affects the CIP funding is a reduction in community and public benefits, which have historically provided significant funding for transportation improvements. Given the funding situation, the staff recommended an approach to City Council of maximizing the availability of the unrestricted CIP reserve and construction conveyance tax funds for projects with no dedicated funding sources. Starting with funding the non-discretionary pavement projects off the top, prioritizing amendments to existing projects second, and using the criteria listed on the right to prioritize the remaining discretionary projects, including pavement maintenance. Pavement maintenance continues to be a priority for the city. The city pavement condition has fallen from 72 in 2021 to 67 this year as a result of previous staff resource challenges. The city has accumulated 34 million of paving projects, and staff is continuing to address the backlog of projects, which includes 3 projects constructed or nearing completion, 2 projects starting construction this year, 5 starting construction in the next 2 years, and 5 projects starting design over the next 9 months. As you can see, Public Works has been busy delivering these projects in design and construction to aggressively address our backlog. Switching over to pavement funding and pavement condition index. The bar graph shows past investment in paving of 6 to 7 million per year, which fell below 5 million in 2021 and has rebounded back to approximately 5.8 million per year. The orange line shows that the pavement condition was in the low 70s in 2021. The 2024 assessment shows it to be at 67. As shown here, at the current baseline funding levels of approximately 5.8 million per year, the PCI will continue to slowly decline. There is a need to increase the baseline funding levels to maintain PCI levels and avoid further decline. Approximately 8 million is needed per year to maintain the PCI, and 14 million per year for 5 years to increase the PCI by 5 points. As a result, staff is recommending to prioritize and continue funding pavement projects to support the city's pavement maintenance needs. In reviewing new project requests, staff considered staffing resources, available funding, council strategic priorities, and council direction previously received over the last year. Staff recommended the preliminary fiscal year 2024-25 CIP at the April 9th council study session, including the CIPs on the screen involving bicycle and pedestrian improvements and/or enhancements, including 3 pavement maintenance projects. These pavement maintenance projects provide a smooth and safe roadway surface for modes of transportation and provide opportunity for integration of active transportation elements such as American with Disabilities Act compliant curb ramps, high visibility crosswalks, and bike lane striping where feasible. The city council generally supported the staff recommended fiscal year 2024-25 CIP and did provide the following directions to staff. Add the active transportation improvements project, add the El Camino Real Castro protected intersection and Castro bikeway improvements, close and unscheduled the Hope Street and Villa Street traffic signal installation project, and keep the undergrounding utilities at 1020 Terabella active. Staff is evaluating funding sources for the top two projects and will recommend inclusion in the 2024-25 CIP. Which brings us to staff recommendation. We are seeking input and support from the BPAC on the recommended active transportation related CIP projects, including the council directed addition of the active transportation improvements project and the El Camino Real Castro protected intersection and Castro bikeway improvements. Following this, staff will develop and present the recommended fiscal year 2024-25 to the city council for adoption on June 25th, 2024. And with that, I'd like to open it up for questions and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. So any members of the committee have any committee clarifying questions on the presentation? Yes.
I have a bunch of boring questions because I asked a clarifying question and I still couldn't figure out what these projects were. So I'm just hoping you could tell me where they are. Street reconstruction and cross culvert removal, 1948 and 1949.
So those are multiple locations. Often we find a lot of the existing cross culverts in the downtown area. There was a project that we started a few years ago specifically on Dana Street, but those could be multiple locations and multiple corners. A lot of times when you're going around downtown and you see a corner that has a buried tube around the corner, those are typically where we identify them. I think there's probably remaining in the city, probably 24 of those locations, maybe 36, and we're trying slowly chipping away at those.
Okay. Because there was also like the same pairing, 24-28 and 24-30.
Yes, so we're chipping away at those. So we fund those periodically, put those into the design queue, and move them from design into construction. And then as we get additional funding and additional resources, we'll bring another project on board. So we're not trying to do them all at once. We're programming that.
And that's why they get different project numbers.
Correct.
But there's no way for me to find out where these are going on.
Well, the one in design, those locations have been identified. The future projects that haven't started yet, we haven't identified specific locations yet, but we could probably find you a general list of those that are remaining. We can start there.
Okay. And then street resurfacing 2101.
We have a laundry list for that one.
Is that the one that's filled?
We do have maps. Let me see if I can find 2101 for you. Keep going.
Okay, SB1 streets 2130. Annual street maintenance 2201. Concrete sidewalk curb repairs 2202, 2302. SB1 streets project 2203 and 2303. Biennial installation of ADA curb ramps 2204 and 2404. Annual street maintenance 2301 and 2401. SB1 streets project 2403. These all looked like the same to me, but they had different dates and different.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know.
The reason why we do not list the location as some of the projects will have multiple locations within the city. And the project title would just be too long if we include the street names for those. But what we do try to capture with the annual projects is we're trying to get different neighborhoods within the city, depending on the PCI level for each of the neighborhood associations. And then we kind of prioritize them on the needs, and then we go on a rotational basis to make sure that we're hitting all of the different neighborhoods in the city with the different pavement projects we have. We have the street reconstruction, the SB1 projects, and the annual street maintenance projects.
Okay,
But if you want, we could provide a specific location for each one. The SB1 locations are adopted by city council the previous year before they start design. So those locations are known. And for the active projects, the 24s and earlier have no locations, and we can share those with you.
okay. And none of these are really in discussion. They're just kind of kept track of, but none of them are affected by the smaller amount of funding or are being delayed, or I'm just wondering, like, if we don't know where they are, like, how can we,
Prioritize them.
or give any feedback on them?
Yeah, that's fair. So if they're on the active project list, that means they're budgeted. And the only way that they may be in jeopardy is if they exceed the budget. So when there isn't a budget exceedance, we've had that before. We sort of scramble around and we'll look for reserve funds or available funds from that weren't spent on another project, for example, and we can move those in and shore those up. To go back to your other question, how would you know like, where this is in the process? We do have an active project list. And some of these probably came off of the active project list. I'm looking at 2130 now, and it's already developed into a design package. And I could read off the streets, but
I'm just curious, maybe just.
yeah. So the SB1 streets, the 2130 includes the 3 blocks of Castro, which were slurry sealed late last year. And then on top of that, there's a couple streets in the Grant Sleeper area, the Grant Road, Sylvan Park neighborhood, as well as some closer to the downtown area, Velarde Street, and a few others that I'm not seeing here on the list yet. Bay and Sylvan, Bay Street as it abuts El Camino. So that's a good example of a project that's really not here for debate, like really that's kind of in progress. And a lot of these I can see that are identified are also in progress. So the SB1 Streets project, there's a laundry list of projects there. Member Kuzmal, you mentioned the map. So there is a online map on our public webpage. So several of these are on that map, but they're simply not identified as linked to a specific project. We simply show them by year of when they're going to be actually anticipated to be moved forward. And then to go back to your other question about funding, future projects, as we see funding projections go down, those will be in jeopardy of being scaled down. So these projects are not in jeopardy. Future funding will have to be balanced with our priorities. So if I have a list of 15 projects this year, and I see another 15 or 20% funding reduction, then that project list will shrink. And our deferred maintenance will grow.
Thank you. My other question was about the Terabella undergrounding of the power lines. What are the benefits of undergrounding, and what happens to the quote unquote savings if that is not done? Are they still specific to that area, or do they just go into the general CIP budget?
Sure. So to your last question, your last part of your question, we had recommended council in April to defund this project and to reallocate the funds back into the neighborhood fund, so they would stay in that neighborhood. The value of an undergrounding project, it can be beautification, it can be pedestrian benefits because you don't have as many overhead lines. Other areas, if it was in a different city, you could argue that there was a fire protection benefit. Really for this location, it really is beautification.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other committee members? Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question primarily about the sidewalk rehabilitation. So El Camino Real has had some improvements with redevelopment, but there are some sections that have had 40 years of tree growth and are mountainous, let's put it that way. Is that city project or is that Caltrans project? So I guess at least some sections seem to be in the worst condition of any sidewalk I've seen in the city.
So for the section of El Camino that is within Mountain View, that is actually city responsibility. If you go up and down the corridor, that changes. But for Mountain View, that is the city responsibility. So we need to program that into the CIP. A lot of the sidewalk projects in the past have been identified by residents. If they identify a problem, they send it in through a Comcate and we put it on our list and then we respond to it. This year, different from many other years, we're actually getting a programmatic assessment of all the sidewalks and all of the deflections and issues with sidewalks. And so that will dictate our priorities. As soon as that report is finalized and come in and we're able to evaluate it, that will give us a lot of feedback for us to program future sidewalk projects. You are more than welcome to give us specific locations and we are actively looking at our next sidewalk project is still kind of in that previous phase of like we're as we receive comments, we'll build that list.
Yeah, there are a couple, like say, stretches that haven't been redeveloped.
Yes.
The most significant one that's kind of continuous is from, I guess it's the north, west side of El Camino between Shoreline or Miramonte and El Monte. Okay, so the other side of that had a lot of redevelopments, but some hot spots are done, and then there's obviously others, but that's the most deflected, I guess, is the words you used, because of all the, I mean, trees are beautiful, planted 40 years ago. They look really nice now and shade El Camino, but the sidewalk is gone and they've often added asphalt in its place. And it's just very ominous, I guess, the way I describe it.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll also add just for information that Caltrans is doing sidewalk repairs now, primarily at the curb ramps, the corners. So we are seeing that that construction work starting to do what we call the bulb outs to shorten that distance on the side streets.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Member Griswold.
Yeah, I guess two sort of higher level questions. One, so given the council direction, where are we ending up on that like curve of maintaining versus improving versus declining PCI going forwards? Since that was mentioned in the slide, I didn't quite catch if given council direction and current expectations, we're going to end up below that over the next few years or above that, or.
Yeah, so our message to council is if we continue at the spending level we are at now, we will see a flattening and then we'll see a continuous decline. So we have some investment if you I think it was slide 6 slide 9 showed the graph. But it was in a downward trajectory. There was a flat part because we have some current projects that are investing 5 million and 20 million over the next 2 years. And then after that, it'll slowly decline.
But none of the expected changes in this round of the CIP are expected to meaningfully adjust that projected number.
I'm not sure I understand.
Given the recommendation that's likely to come forward and to council at when they actually are looking to approve the CIP, it's not expected that projected number will be, it will be at that projected number.
That's correct. That's correct. We'll bring additional information to council on this at a later date. But without additional funding, like an increase in substantial revenue, that's not going to change.
Yeah, just make sure I understood what that's all we need. And the second question I had was, My impression looking at the things that the council was, the direction the council provided of those 4 items was that came out to a net needing more funding. Is that just we believe that we can locate the funding sources from grants or whatever to sort that out, or what is that, was there a sort of slack room in the budget going into that meeting, or what? I was just curious how that, or do those 4 items all balance out to net zero?
Which 4 items?
The like,
The last ones?
yeah,
The
that
4
last thing of
additional
the
ones.
adding the acquisition improvements, the Upton Real Castro. Yeah,
So council's feedback wasn't exactly a balancing act. They asked us to go back and look at options and develop some options. The one on the bottom left corner, the Hope Street and Villa, that was a cancellation.
Yeah.
So that money can be reallocated to the other projects. We think we can make that balance work. We've identified some additional funds. We have a bridge project that we are moving forward with into design, so we can fund that for design. And then later on, we will seek out construction funding for that project, so we can defund the construction element to fund these priorities. Council asks staff to do that, and they didn't really do that balancing on the dais.
yeah, like I understand that. It's just I assume they, in directing staff to figure that out, they weren't expecting staff to magic money out of thin air. So I was
Yes.
curious how that sorted out.
Yeah.
Um,
And when we do that, there is a color of money challenge to that,
Okay.
like sewer funds need to stay with sewer. We can't reallocate those. There's a lot of constraints there.
All right, those were the questions I had.
I see member Fenwick has her hand raised.
Thank you. I had some similar questions, but one was a follow-on to the undergrounding utilities at 1020 Tarabella. Could you, I didn't see it in our agenda packet. I'm wondering if you could summarize why council chose to keep that project open?
I would direct member Fenwick back to the study session video. I think there's some good discussion at the end of that provides each council member's justification. From what I remember, there was an equity lens component to that discussion where they felt that this project was being treated somehow differently because it was a below market development. I don't know if that's the case, but that was the sentiment that I heard from council.
Thank you. My second question was, and I wish I could find this, but when I was reading through all the materials before, there's a project specifically, sorry, I'm trying to find the number, Grant Road and Sleeper, 2139, that now has 9 intersections listed, phases 1 and 2.
Correct.
With it. And when I went, I can't find where it's referenced now, but when I went, I did somehow in all my searching before preparing for the meeting, I found what those intersections were, and they are not all necessarily near Grant and Sleeper. Will those, is that correct, that they're not necessarily right there next to Grant and Sleeper?
Yes, that's correct.
And is there a risk that by adding those additional intersections onto this project that it may cause this overall project to slip, or is it planned to be worked in multiple phases? I speak, let me phrase that like from a funding thing, like, are we able to make progress even if we don't have funding for all of those intersections?
So the way we were able to add the 9 new intersection was that we were able to combine 2 projects into one. And your question was the same question that we got from the city engineer, which was there was no interest in delaying the Grant Sleeper improvements in order to add in the 9 other intersections. So we are going to be phasing this into 2 phases. The first phase will include Grant Sleeper, as well as Grant and Franklin. And then the other intersections will be added later.
Great, thank you. That answers my clarifying questions. Thank you.
You had some additional.
Yes, I had a couple more, for the El Camino, Castro, Yosemite High School. Is there an advantage to doing them now while El Camino is being redone, or can they in principle be done later?
In principle, they can certainly be done later. We were working with Caltrans for several years. In coordination with them, we were essentially offering the city's funding to incorporate the bike and pedestrian elements that were identified in the Castro streetscape plan. And that streetscape plan did include, I think, 5 priority intersections for improvements, for complete street improvements. Caltrans declined to include those in their design. We worked really hard to get the class 2 and the class 4 bike lanes into the design and the parking removal. So the city is going to be responsible for incorporating and designing all of the intersection improvements. So those will be programmed into the CIP. It would not make sense now to try to get Caltrans to do that. It would be moving the bus a little bit too fast.
And the design for Castro, I assume this is like on Castro, the Yosemite High School, et cetera. Is it related to the things we saw for the first 3 blocks of Castro a while back, or?
No, this was related to what you saw in relation to Castro Bikeway.
Okay, sorry, first 3 blocks, I mean like from El Camino.
Oh. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so it would look something like.
Yes. Yeah. I don't remember the data, but received the designs for that.
Yeah, we would be taking those elements and incorporating them into the design. So we would bring that back to BPAC. It hasn't been started yet. It hasn't been
Oh, well, okay.
assigned a project manager. But we were directed per council to make that as a priority for the corridor, which means we would be doing the intersection up to Yosemite in that one project.
And just to make sure, because you said 3 blocks, it would just be the 1 block north of El Camino. So it would be from El Camino to High School Way.
Not Yosemite.
Right, Yosemite.
Yosemite High School, they're kind of.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Okay, just one more, for the speed bumps that are on Church. Were they any of these numbers of projects?
I can speak to that. That was part of the NTMP
Yes, the
process.
speed
Oh,
bumps
thank
usually
you.
get installed as part of one of the non-discretionary projects, the annual NTMP, the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Measure Program. So as residents request them, our traffic reviews surveys the neighborhood and puts in the request if the survey exceeds the percentage needed.
Okay, thanks.
I can follow on that. Does the NTMP have its own funding source, or is it discretionary?
It has its own funding, or it's unrestricted funding.
Yeah, but it's combined with some other things such as signal upgrades.
And if I'm not mistaken, it's non-discretionary?
It's non-discretionary.
Non-discretionary, so that puts it into a higher priority for council. They recognize that and they identify that as something they want to
When
fund.
something is identified with through the NTMP program, that's considered a non-discretionary, and that makes it harder or less. You're not going to recommend moving those funds.
Correct. That's correct. Yeah, council essentially put those funds aside for that.
Mhm.
And the discretionary projects are really the ones that they were looking at at the study session for deferral.
I had a question about the funding sources. So you had a slide about the funding sources for roadways, the gas tax and SB1 and Measure B and et cetera. none of those funding sources, the city really has control over, correct?
The ones that are listed, that's correct.
And in general, you're talking about the pavement condition. The funding from the transportation funds is not enough to maintain the PCI? Like, what's the like shortfall in general for that set of funds versus maintaining pavement condition? Do you have a sense of that?
So we're talking about a couple different things. So let me clarify. The third column shows gas tax, SB1, vehicle tax, vehicle license fees, and VTA. All of those are outside funding.
Yeah.
The last bullet there is general fund.
Okay,
So that is-
I'm talking about the top four.
So the top four, you're correct. We are at the whims of, California drivers who either pay their license fees or sell their cars or choose to drive or choose to work from home. So those are all variable.
Yes.
This is a transportation fund, and those transportation funds fund CIPs that have transportation specific elements.
Correct.
So that's anything that we put above the paving.
Okay,
So our group, delivers paving for the city, and anything above that, whether it's the paint or the signage or signals, that will come from the transportation fund. So there's
Okay.
separate funding because it is such a higher expense. There's separate funding that also contributes to paving. So there's non-discretionary street maintenance. In addition to this, SB1 was identified for street improvements. So those could be spent on either transportation or paving funding. Measure B can be spent on paving improvements or on transportation. So there's a lot of overlap.
Okay.
To go back to your shortfall, yes, we're saying that somewhere between $8 million and $14 million per year is where we're going to be looking for additional funding to increase, either maintain or increase PCI.
Okay, so those funds in general are not used for paving, use different funds.
These funds will augment the other funds for paving. But yes, the other one, there's over $1 million per year in construction rehabilitation, and there's a street maintenance fund. And then the third one really is the SB1 fund, which contributes to paving.
Okay, so of those, only the SB1 is making a significant dent in our pavement maintenance.
Contribution?
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and verify that, but.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you knew like how that.
If
the
I
expense and the
could
impact.
add, we are limited on what we can use some of these fundings for, like the SB1 and Measure B, depending where our PCI falls. We can only focus, where we are today, we can only focus those funds on pavement improvement projects. If we were above, I believe, 70 or 75, we could use it on congestion management projects, traffic signal projects, things like that. But I think at this time, we are limited to using those on pavement improvement projects. So
And can I just qualify what you said? So I think when Robert and Joy talk about Measure B, they're talking about the Measure B local streets and
local
road
streets.
program.
Correct.
There's a
Yeah.
bunch of other programs that
thank
you might have heard of as well in Measure B, including our Safe Routes to School program, and the pedestrian bicycle program and the planning one. So lots of
Yes,
programs
thank you.
underneath.
There's
Measure B.
grants, yes.
Thank you, that was education. Now we will move.
Member Fenwick has her hand.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yes, thank you. I just had a related question about the undergrounding. Does the city typically pay and do separate undergrounding projects?
So historically, the city has only done undergrounding projects that, in collaboration with PG&E as part of the Rule 20A project, where ratepayers essentially pay in as part of their monthly bills. And that money is accumulated, and then the city identifies a corridor for undergrounding. Portions of Ringsdorf were undergrounded back in I think the 2010s. California Street, portions of Cal Street have been undergrounded. The remainder of California Street, west of Shoreline, is planned to be undergrounded. So we do have projects, but they are not frequently associated with a development. I've never seen it associated with a development.
Thank you. So my understanding is those would typically also be, if I understood your answer, in conjunction with ratepayer fees as well, like the residents contributing to the project as well.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more clarifying questions, let's move on to public comment. Would any member of the public like to comment on this item? Anyone on the line?
There are no hands raised.
Then we will move on
Wait.
to, wait,
You just had a hand raised. Celia Paymer, I'm gonna click to allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Just quick comment, in agreement with some things I heard earlier on like sleeper, that I hope the intersection improvements are kept as a kind of low priority to making sure that the Grant sleeper intersection does happen. That one's super important to our safe routes to school and routes to the park, whereas most of the intersection improvements will be disconnected from sidewalks because it is not contiguous over there. And the sidewalks that do exist have holes in the middle of them. So I don't see the intersection improvements making a huge change over there, whereas the Grant Sleeper intersection is a huge project that we need done. Thanks.
Bruce England, I'm gonna click to allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thanks, Brandon. Bruce England, Wisman Station Drive. I came in late, so I might have missed this in the discussion, but City Council tomorrow night is talking about potential revenue measures going on the fall ballot, which could potentially, if that passes, there could be some more money coming in that could help move along some of the CIP projects. I don't know if that's part of your discussion or consideration. I imagine it's talked about at least at the staff level, but I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
And I'm seeing no more hands raised.
thank you. Now we will move on to committee comments. Does any member of the committee have any comments to make on this item? Member Kuzma.
Yeah, well, first of all, just since it came up so much with public comment and the prior comments about where the intersection locations are, we will, I think they're mentioned in the memo for the next item, which maybe where member Fenwick is remembering having seen it. And for reference, those are, I would consider those distributed very much around the city, which is fine in my opinion. It's just I would not consider it as a like localized to that neighborhood. So if people are thinking about it, the additional projects that way, that's perhaps not the way to think about it. Like 3 of them are along Middlefield, which is great, but it's not in the same neighborhood as Sleeper and Grant. And there is one at Sleeper and Franklin, which is nearby, but does have sidewalks to the public comment. But the things I was actually intending to say, it generally seems like the things that council suggested are match with what I would have tried to say, like of the projects that were on that like potentially getting deferred that had active transportation improvements, those are probably the ones I would say I wanted to see prioritized. It's always feels hard to give feedback at this stage because I think the place where it's easier to give feedback is when we're like looking at something like active transportation plan and we have a list of everything that might happen, but that's the way the process works. And yeah, it's seeing this list, seeing the chart reminds me that paving is very expensive. And one of the things is I had not caught the within TMP funding words prior to the questions earlier in this meeting, which makes me, I was looking at the actual funding quantities and it seems reasonable. I think it might actually be helpful in future like CIP discussions or the such to call that out, bubble that up more to the front as a thing that's has both, it's a way that we're dedicating resources to improving street safety, and it helps make it clear what trade-offs we are making in terms of what projects we are prioritizing. Yeah, that's that's basically sort of what I had, unless I think of something else.
Okay, I see, Member Fenwick has her hand raised.
Thank you. I just want to say, I think this is a really tough position for us to be in, and I'm grateful that we've been taking advantage of the funding when we have had it. You can probably tell from my comments, though, I have some pretty strong feelings about the undergrounding at Terabella. With our current pavement conditions, and I have greatly benefited for the number of presentations at BPAC, and I've seen them at council as well, about how if we don't stay on top of our pavement, we just have much more expensive, bigger problems later on. And looking at that chart, I see a lot of bigger problems coming around the corner. And when we think about equity and stability for our entire city, being able to safely ride your bikes on these roads, being able to safely use the streets, both as a vehicle and as a bicyclist, across the city, serves all of our residents. I personally love when there's undergrounding projects. I think it does beautify the city significantly and the neighborhood or the street that it is on. I think it can also improve safety by not having necessarily utility poles in the sidewalk. That could be great. There's a lot of advantages of that. But for my own experience, when the city was doing major sewage projects, replacements in our neighborhood, and the residents said, "Hey, we want to underground our wires," we were told, "Yeah, you asked too late." So we couldn't, it wasn't even a consideration. And that's fine. So we still have the wires, they cut through the trees. So if you, when we talk about a beautification thing, the trees have to be cut in U shapes so the wires can go through, which is not great for the trees. It's not great for the city. So I do really appreciate the effort, but not at the expense of our pavement management. I think our pavement management projects go above and beyond this. If there was, in particular, because that development seems to be like it might be delayed on Terabella, it doesn't seem like the highest priority project to do. While I agree it does create beautification, it is great for our trees and for the longevity of our trees. Right now, I think our focus should be on pavement management. So that's it. Otherwise, I think you're doing the best you can with the money available.
Yes.
First, I want to thank you for a very clear and well-organized presentation. It was just really great. So thank you. I guess I disagree a little bit on the Terabella undergrounding, but I agree with the other council recommendations. I think if the money could stay in that neighborhood, it is a really disadvantaged neighborhood as far as being able to get around on foot or by bike. I think there are like no bike lanes there. And I know we don't have the residents living there yet to ask them, would you rather have a bike lane or have this undergrounded? And maybe that's not how the money would work. But it just seems like a really expensive thing that would have marvelous benefits, but maybe the benefit that people would want is something else. And I just wish we could maybe hold it in reserve, especially since it seems like the development is not started yet. So maybe there's a way to get ideas for improving that neighborhood. I mean, like with 101 and 85, like Stevens Creek Trail is on the other side. There's no way to get to it. And I know that would be many, many millions to connect them to Stevens Creek Trail, but it's really hard actually to get out of that neighborhood. You're either going on Shoreline, which will eventually improve, but then like in order to get back, like I don't even know how you would get to the good stuff, the good bike infra. And then if you come down on Middlefield, you basically also have to go all the way to Shoreline, as far as I know, to then go back towards Stevens Creek Trail. So I just wonder whether it makes sense to underground power lines versus provide some kind of active transportation infrastructure for that neighborhood. I think the Yosemite, Castro, El Camino intersection, that's really important given Graham Middle School there and the masses of kids who go through there. And I agree with the canceling the signal improvement at Hope and Villa. For the pavement, even though we've been educated so much about it, it's still, I wish that there was a way to tie the money source more to because we've been told in the past that what causes the degradation are the heavy trucks. I don't know if it would be possible to maybe have not fees are terrible, but I don't know, maybe part of our garbage collection fee or something like that is for the degradation to pavement due to garbage trucks, or maybe when there's new development and construction, if there are going to be cement mixers going down, maybe there's a fee to offset the damage from the cement mixers. I don't know, or if there are businesses that have lots of deliveries or something like that, maybe there's a fee that they could pay. It just seems like disproportionately we also all get deliveries, but sometimes those are smaller trucks. To tie it more to what's causing the pavement degradation as opposed to it's just this huge problem and we're all paying equally. This is I sometimes wonder, so El Camino got very degraded, but now we're getting complete streets out of it. So maybe for some streets, we could let them go and then rebuild in a way that we like. I know that's expensive, but we wouldn't have a choice and then we would have marvelous things. Yeah, but I think that's mostly it. Agree with the recommendations, except maybe not the undergrounding, if it would be possible to conserve those funds for that neighborhood. Thanks.
I guess I can go. I really appreciate, staff being able to figure out. I also agree that the El Camino and Grand intersection, very important. And I appreciate that you are working hard to get all these improvements done, considering fiscal condition. I don't have a lot to say on undergrounding, mostly because I don't know a lot about it. Or what else could happen in that neighborhood if there were an alternative. So that's all to stay quiet. I wanted to what Member Dominic said about the trucks in the fourth power law, and with these electric vehicles, they're great, but they're also a bit heavier. But unfortunately, I don't see any practical way for the city to, the county could theoretically tie your registration to the weight of your vehicle, but the city can't do that. Sure.
Hasn't.
Has it? Could we?
Is the might do that.
You register with the county. I don't know if the city is even involved. Take that wrong.
Some cities require registration. Larger cities.
I didn't know that.
The city advocates for legislation.
Yeah, that would be staff would advocate for legislation. That's something I can bring up with the council for sure. I didn't know that some cities do that. I think that would be an interesting thing to pursue. As it stands, most of the funding for the pavement itself is not coming from any related source. Did not know some information, but those are bigger problems than I think we can solve in this meeting right now. I just wanted to say thanks for the presentation and thanks for all you did.
Okay, I'll be quick. My main comments is I think, as we heard with electric vehicle weights and other aspects, things are changing. My most Largest concern is active mobility, biking and walking. That's not adding to or hopefully shifting carbon footprint should be a priority, and it's only going to get more important. So I'm not as worried about things like undergrounding utilities if we've got existential issues coming for temperature and other things. So I don't have any real direct comments other than whatever we can do to shift trips away from, carbon polluting sources into less impactful is good. And to me, that means, key projects to get people to bike and walk. We've heard about Grant Sleeper as a key impediment to people biking and walking into and out of that neighborhood. So that lines up with both my kind of short term, and I think it's only going to get more and more pressure on all of us to address it as the moving issues that science has forecast become more apparent.
Just wanted to give my 2 cents on a couple of things. One is I do not feel qualified to speak much on the undergrounding. I will say, I think any sort of knowing how council tends to like to approach these things, I imagine if anything were to change on that, well, I do have some trepidation about it, I guess I will say. I do not feel qualified to speak on it, but I know council with this types of things, but with this sort of thing, likes to have like a very concrete alternative if there were an alternative to doing that sort of thing. And I'm not sure, I don't know what the alternative would be. And just, I would like to reiterate the things that Member Dominic and Chair Stoney brought up of if we can figure out how to structure fees and whatnot better for getting paving to work well, that would be great. Also having less street surface area in some spots might make sense, but that's a bigger conversation.
Reminded of the story about Copenhagen became a biking city because they couldn't afford to build the car infrastructure. Yeah, so maybe there's some silver lining to our fiscal. If we invested in the right sorts of things and get people moving in lighter vehicles, they got electric bikes too. Those are nice. Anyway, if we are done, then we will move on.
Do we need a motion or
I think
recommendation?
so. There was no specific recommendation you were looking for?
Yeah, we were seeking just input on the projects and support for the recommended fiscal year.
I think we have provided. Okay,
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
thank you very much. We'll move on to item 6.2, Transportation Development Act, Article 3, funding.
Yes, Chair, let me get the screen all set up. Thank you, Chair. I'm Brandon White, Active Transportation Planner for the City of Mountain View, and I appreciate the time you guys are affording me to talk to you today about transportation development Article 3 funds. So first, let me tell you what those funds actually are. So it's an annual state grant, which is administered by the VTA. And these funds are dedicated to pedestrian and bicycle improvements. They're generated by sales tax, which of course can vary annually. So the amount of TDA free funds we get is different every year. These funds can be banked, and they can be banked for up to 5 years. And then once allocated, work must start within 1 year of the funding being allocated. They are use it or lose it funds. So if we don't use them, they go back into the pot for other communities in Santa Clara County. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about some of what you've already heard, but the funding and inflationary pressures that we've had occur in the last few years. When COVID occurred, staffing levels dropped significantly. Now they have certainly improved, but during that process, a backlog of projects was generated. Because there was a backlog of projects, they were more exposed to inflationary pressures. And we saw inflation rates in California in 2022 of 9.3 and 9.4 in 2022 and 23 respectively. And this has affected the cost of all of our projects have gone up effectively. Meanwhile, as you heard, revenues are down. So costs have gone up, revenues are down, and there's a project backlog. Revenues are down between 15 and 48% over last year. You can see the chart there. This means that we need to focus on our existing projects before new in order to get out of this sort of negative feedback loop of inflation and having projects stay on. So this is how the TDA3 funds have been used in previous years. You can see Villa Shoreline improvements. You can see those right now. They're out there in concrete. Then we banked funds, and you can see Miramonte Avenue project received 346,000 with the last year's allocation. And that project, like all of the projects, has it wasn't fully funded last time. This wasn't enough money last time to complete the gap. And given the issues that I've just mentioned, that gap has actually gotten larger due to inflation and loss of revenue. So this meeting today is to decide where to recommend the $121,052 of new TDA3 funds that VTA is allocating to the city of Mountain View. The Miramonte Improvements Project. This project closes a sidewalk gap, provides a two-way cycle track. Right in front of our school, we've had documented crashes that fortunately were not significantly severe, but could have been. Provides bold outs at most, if not all, of the crossings. An enhanced mid-block crossing at Hans. And this design is complete. The other project we're presenting to you today is the Grant Sleeper project, which was discussed a little bit earlier, which is enhanced pedestrian crossings. So rapid rectangular flashing beacons, which you see there with the man crossing, or RFBs, flashing LEDs, which are basically the same as the RFB, except the sign flashes. Pedestrian hybrid beacons, which you see there on the right, which we do have in Mountain View on El Camino Real. That design is underway. And there are many locations all across the city. You can see there all the various locations: Grant, Middlefield, Cuesta, Heatherstone, Dana, Sleeper, and Ranksdorf. So for a total of 10 locations with Grant Sleeper included in that list. The recommendation today is to provide the new TDA3 funds to Miramonte Improvement Project. It's had previous BPAC support. The project provides enhanced improvements, which had increased the cost of the project. Those were responses to the crash that I mentioned right in front of the school. There was a budget shortfall, which still exceeds the amount of funding that TDA3 has. But the project is ready for construction this year. And that will keep us in line with the previous TDA3 funds and still be able to utilize these TDA3 funds should the BPAC and they make the recommendation and the council make the decision. Alternatives are to fund the Grant Sleeper project, which is still in design, or bank the funds. So next steps, if banking the funds, BPAC would review, prioritize, and recommend projects for the annual TDA3 funding application cycle next year, 25-26. But if allocating the funds, staff will move forward with the BPAC's recommendation to the city council, which will be brought to them on June 28th.
Or before.
On June, it would be brought on or before. That is all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Member Kuzma.
Yes, I don't know, I'd asked this in advance, but what are the budget gaps in those two projects? In the like, for the Miramonte project, how big is the budget gap and how big is the budget gap in the Grant Sleeper project? Or would they both roughly be filled by this 121,050?
They won't roughly be filled. I know them, but I have the man who taught me those numbers. So, Mr. Gonzalez, if you want to.
The Miramonte budget gap is over $2 million. And the Grant Sleeper budget gap isn't quite so high. I think it's closer to, I think, maybe 1.7. So when that happens, I don't beg Brandon for money. I recognize that the TDA 3 funding isn't going to fill that. We typically have to go to finance. We have to have a conversation about use of reserve funding. That's at the discretion of the finance manager and at the discretion of the city manager. In the past, we've gotten those green lights and thumbs up to get those. So we're having those conversations now. The TDA 3 funding does help either of those projects. So that we appreciate all the help that we can get. But yeah, to answer your question.
Yeah, the clarification there is just making sure it's not one of these would completely fill the backfill, the other it would only fill it partially or something. So it would both be pretty partial. Okay. And in terms of the paths for both of these for fully backfilling the funding is similar, but perhaps a slightly more urgent timeline on the Miramonte project. Is that accurate?
We're hoping that both of these can go into construction in 2025, or excuse me, 2024, the second half of 2024 and going into 2025. Miramonte is a longer duration. Miramonte was recommended because it is a higher community priority. They're both high on our list to deliver. I think Miramonte was selected because one, it's a bigger project and it had that priority funding. In terms of timing, they both will get done very soon.
And the more targeted question is, there's not like one of these would be more eligible for some grant that we think we can get in the next 6 months that would help with this.
I haven't really thought of it that way. If either one would be more competitive. They're both competitive for the same grants. I would say it that way, that if we were to pursue these, we would pick one and we would pursue grant funding, probably from Measure B or some other local grant. But we are well into we're ready to go into construction phase. So the timing of a grant application.
That would be my impression.
Is not great.
Trying to make sure I understood there wasn't a clear funding source that would work for one, but not the other.
If there was a grant application due tomorrow, Rhea and I would be talking about a third project that is currently in design. That would maybe be a better candidate.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions? And asking all my questions. Now we will move on to public comment. Is there any member of the public wishing to speak on this item? Anybody person, online?
At this moment, I am not seeing any hands raised online. No hands.
Okay. Then I guess we will move on to committee comments.
I assume a motion for the recommendation is in order.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So both the Grant Sleeper and the Miramonte project have good impact, and both of them would be fantastic to see under construction. It sounds like the Grant Sleeper is not yet ready for construction, but would be on a time frame that the loss of the TDA fund wouldn't be likely. So I'm in favor of aligning with the staff recommendation. If there was any probability that we would be losing funds, then I would be more likely to say, let's bank them. But it sounds like we're fairly confident that one of those two projects would move forward. with some combination of funding that's being sought to close those gaps. So I'm comfortable with the staff recommendation, and hopefully both of them can get delivered soon.
Thanks. I see Member Fenwick has her hand raised.
Yeah, I appreciate this presentation. I thank you for bringing us choices. I think you've heard BPAC members request this in the past, so thank you very much. It gives us a lot to think about. I also am in support of the staff recommendation. This is where we gave our funding last year, and this is a area that goes by schools, is on routes to schools, is a heavy area for people to get around and for bicycle traffic. So I think it would be in line with all the stuff that we are normally looking for to support. I think also the Grant Sleeper project and its amended, added intersections and thank you, Member Kushmal. That is where I saw those other intersections. So thank you. I think is also has merit. But where we are construction-wise with Miramonte, I would really like to see that one supported and see it move forward.
Yes, Member Anna.
I'm supportive of either. I'll just kind of blab about how great it would have been to have these already. So for Miramonte, I think we've made, my family, like hundreds, if not 1,000 trips by car from downtown Mountain View, just a mile down to the dojo that's at Cuesta and Miramonte, because we didn't want to bike on Miramonte with a kid. So I think that's really great. Also, I have a knack for exploring all the ways that bikes can do not great things when the infrastructure isn't there. So my son's orthodontist, it's strategically located across from the middle school. And now he was in high school, and so we needed to get from in front of Graham to Mountain View High. So we exactly needed to like go down Miramonte and then Hans and so on. So the first time I biked in the bike lane going the wrong way. My son was on the sidewalk, and then I realized that there are no driveways. And so then the next time we were both on the sidewalk, and now we just bike on the sidewalk going the wrong way there. So I think once you have that, then we will be using the two-way cycle track. Actually, he's done with his orthodontic treatment. And he's no longer doing karate, so I don't know, but had this project been done a while ago, it would have been really useful. And then I've also done things like bike to Mountain View High just to meet him after school so that I could Frogger with him across Grant at Sleeper, because I'm too afraid for him to do that on his own. So I'm also excited about that one. And then the other, I mean, I like a lot of the other intersections with Grant and Sleeper, but the Cuesta and Bonita one, I was picking up my son at the Cuesta tennis courts coming from Grant, going on Cuesta, and it was winter. And there was a pedestrian in the crosswalk, and I didn't see them. I'm pretty sure they saw me and that they were, well, I don't know. Anyway, they didn't run in front of the car, but it's something I remember as like a very uncomfortable feeling. And if there had been a flashing beacon, I think, yes. So I think that also can happen soon enough. So I think if others feel like Miramonte is I see merit to both of them, but I'm just saying I really hope you can do both this year or start both this year. Yep.
Particular comments other than to vote for a motion or make the motion.
All right.
Yeah, well, can I move that we approve the staff recommendation to direct the TDA grant E funds the Miramonte Avenue project?
Motion. Okay, all in favor?
I'm in favor.
All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much
Oh,
for the difficult decision. Uh, Now we will move on to item 6.3, which is the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee recommended member appointment.
So there's no staff presentation. So the VTA BPAC has a 2-year term, but you can serve for consecutive terms. We're grateful for Member Adamic serving in that role, and the next term starts currently, and the next term starts July 1st for the next 2 years. So it's a discussion for you to decide who should be the appointed. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, I guess I have,
You want
I have a
clarifying
specific
questions?
question, actually. I believe there was some question at some point about what the qualifications for appointing a member were, or a representative was. I guess my question was, it does it have to be one person as opposed to having someone in an alternate?
Yes, I did clarify that with VTA. They said that currently their bylaws do not allow for an alternate.
Okay, so I have to be one representative, but then our bylaws do not have any restrictions on who it is, but traditionally we've always had it be a BPAC member, is that
That's
correct?
correct. So both the VTA and our bylaws use language. I don't have the exact language with me, but I think it says that the BPAC will select a representative. It doesn't say, and I checked this with our city clerk, whether that means it needs to be a BPAC member. It doesn't necessarily need to be a BPAC member, but it does need to be somebody who would represent and who is selected from the membership of the BPAC for the committee.
That's the thing I wanted to clarify.
Well, and I guess the other clarification was, eligibility and interest of a lot of continuing, if you could refresh that.
Yeah, so because of anticipated travel, I would be missing 2 to 3 meetings a year. Recently, though, it seems like, I mean, I learned that I may be able to participate remotely as Member Fenwick is doing now, like allowed under the Brown Act. So I guess I would still be very happy for someone else to be the VTA BPAC rep. But I think I could also manage to continue, but yeah.
That sounds like, well, we can bleed that into discussion once we get to that section. If there's.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess my other question would be, if someone, well, I guess technically it's not tied to the terms, but if a BPAC member's term expires on BPAC or the such in the middle of being a VTA rep, that's technically an independent thing.
That's my understanding now.
Okay.
Previously,
Yeah.
we thought that it had always been a BPAC member.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just. Nothing critical there.
So we are all eligible.
So just to add to what I just said, so I guess the proviso is that we have this item on our agenda each month of VTA BPAC updates.
So they'd have to be, they'd have to be able to give the update.
Yes.
Yes.
And I guess we're looking for someone to recommend someone.
We would need a public comment.
Oh, public comment. Okay. Oh, yes, we did clarifying questions. Shown by no presentation. All right, public comment. Any member of the public want to make a comment in the room? No. On the internet?
Yes. Emil Abraham, I'm going to click to allow you to talk. You'll have, please unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, so if this appointment is available or open to the public, I'd love to volunteer. If this is the avenue for that at all. But yeah, but I'm pretty available through most months. I should be able to attend BTA meetings then. I attend BPAC meetings here in Mountain View pretty regularly. But yeah, I just thought I'd throw my name in if that's possible. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Oh, I think I saw Bruce England's. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna have to click to allow. Bruce, I'm gonna click to allow you to talk. Please unmute yourself and you have 3 minutes.
I appreciate that, Brandon, but I don't have a comment.
Yep, yep. All right, thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing no other public comment.
All right, then it is time for committee comments.
Anyone excited about it other than model?
We had a member of the public.
We did have a member of the public.
Yeah, I will add, so for myself, I don't think I could do a sufficient bandwidth to cover. So it would take myself out of the running. I do like the idea that it doesn't have to be strictly a BPAC member. And if it's an off ramp for someone wishing to wind down off of BPAC, that's an attractive option. And if we have a demonstrated commitment from someone wishing to ramp up an activity, that's also potential interest. I don't know anyone I can think of offhand that, is immediately in mind for either of those criteria, but that's kind of what my opinion is.
Myself, I am not, Wednesdays are actually honestly not a great time for me. I make these work, but I would be better convenient to make the VTA ones work as well. I would not want to try to row a member of the public into that role just at this meeting, because I don't think any of us really put thought into that beforehand. And so we aren't doing this through as well. We wouldn't be doing that as deliberately as I would like. I would be comfortable if a member of Dom seems comfortable with continuing to do it. And I think if you were missing like one meeting a year because something just really came up, I would be okay with that. I think your updates have been very informative and useful in general so far. So I have appreciated those. Yeah.
Member Fenwick has her hand raised.
Yeah, I just to add whatever to the pot, I agree with pretty much everything said here. I am the outgoing member, so we have at BPAC though had an outgoing BPAC member then continue and then come back and give us updates for a short time, but that was kind of a timing issue if I recall correctly, because of when we had like new BPAC members coming in, it was hard to say like who was going to be available to do it. I am also both because I'm outgoing and my own schedule, not able to pick up that commitment. I think it is incredibly important. I learned so much about what's happening from the sharing from member Adamic that concisely puts in hours of meeting into a short summary that is very consumable. And I feel like I'm really, so I think it is a really important role. I'm not against having someone who's not on the BPAC serve in this function. I will say I regret that I also had not put a lot of thought into that option before coming here. But I think that may be something that we may want to discuss as a committee for the future. I think it is a great way for anyone to be of service to their city of Mountain View and to the county of Santa Clara, but I am not putting my hand in the ring either.
Thank you. Yeah, I would also say, I got a baby at the house and my free time is very limited. I am interested in doing it at some point in the future. Now it's not the right time.
This is recorded.
Yes. You can hold my feet to the fire, but I would say if Member Dominic is willing to continue, it would be appreciated.
Okay, I guess I should say I'm pleased that Emil has expressed interest and maybe that can, you know, at some point happen. It sounds like the committee is okay with my continuing and we can see whether, you know, I actually managed to serve okay in the role if I get reappointed. I do just want to say, like, the VTA BPAC is quite interesting. And so if ever someone finds the time to, you know, go down there and participate, I think it's very worthwhile. And if anything, just during the short time that I've been there, it's ramped up, you know, like it meets every month and you hear from the county and you hear like from the VTA about the funding that they manage. And so it's pretty action-packed and you get to talk to members from other cities and compare notes. It's overall, I think, a good experience.
Just for any day of the week other than Wednesdays.
You are looking to do an actual appointment.
Motion, yeah.
A motion to appoint someone. Okay. Lord,
I'd like to make the motion to appoint Lada Atomic for a 1-year term to serve as the representative. 2-year term. 2-year term to serve as our representative for the city of Mountain View on the county BPAC commission. I'll second that.
all right, everyone in favor?
Aye.
Appreciate it.
If I could maybe just comment for the public as well, that recently more members of the public have commented for the VTA BPAC. And I think for the latest meeting, actually, the chair asked that the public comment be included in the minutes. Kind of more, I don't know. So I think like the if people are interested in participating as the public, I think there's it's pretty integrated. It's like,
Maybe 2 years from now, we can be more prepared for this and think about whether we do want to have some way of advertising that we might actually want to pull from someone who's say regularly commenting at BPAC meetings and watching them, but hasn't been able to engage more yet.
Yeah.
So it was just that I don't think that really anyone had that on their minds until right now, so.
Yes. I agree. The next item, which we are moving to now, is item 6.4, the BPAC fiscal year 2023-24 work plan.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Brandon White, and I will provide you with our normal update. And wherein for the work plan, anything highlighted in yellow is new. We completed for TDA 3 today, preliminary review potential projects. And then the CIP review was provided to you all today. There was a bike ride on the 11th, which we'll talk more about in the staff update. There was member Automix Mountain View High School bike train, which went very well. That happened on the 26th. And a Bike to Boba event that happened on the 12th of April. And then I'll just bring up the tentative agenda list, but this is one of the rare times where nothing has changed. That is all I have. I'm happy to answer any clarifying questions.
All right, any member of the committee have any clarifying question for Brandon White?
This is member Kuzma. How are we doing the joint meeting with Palo Alto in June? Is that a similar to our Los Altos one last year where we were each remoted in?
Is very similar, however, they are not Brown acted, so it'll be just a little bit different, but we are working with their staff to put our structure on them and they just have to follow it.
And they have to do the like advertising location and whatnot?
No, they have to do whatever they do. We still have to do what we do and they will
Oh,
basically
because they are
attend.
members of our body. right?
Yes.
Yes.
They just will attend as a panelist.
Any other committee clarifying questions? There any public comment on the feedback tentative agenda or work plan? And
I am seeing no hands raised.
then committee comments. Don't see any committee comments. Then we get to move to item 6.5, Santa Clara Valley Transportation Agency Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee updates.
Wait, Sammy, okay.
That is you.
Okay, so there will be a Q&A via Zoom on VTA active transportation issues, May 29th at 6 p.m. If you're interested, that's the URL. We saw some photos of the new US 101 De La Cruz interchange improvements, and it's all fancy, like there's the loop-de-loops and the bike path goes under and there's stairs for pedestrians, and that'll be live later this year. Then something that the VTA BPAC does is it convenes these subcommittees. So they had one for Bascom and now they're having one for Homestead Road, and they pull members from the relevant jurisdictions plus others who have experience with that corridor and get feedback on proposed improvements. Then the main items were the Valley Transportation 2050 plan update, which they do every 5 years. And MTC likes to mix it up and kind of change how they prioritize. So they're going away from listing all the projects and more just focusing on big projects, and then also separately programmatic categories. And they were looking for performance metrics related to pedestrians, and the committee recommended safety performance measures. And also somehow including the new county expressway plan, which is in development, because these are kind of going in parallel. And then I saw some projects and I thought, wait, I can't match these to what Mountain View is working on now. And so I had emailed Ria and Brandon, and it turns out that because it's 2050, it's actually far future. So I was hoping, Ria, that you could mention a few of the Mountain View projects that then get listed. And what you see in that list is like how many millions this is going to cost, but it's not that Mountain View will actually get those millions. It's just that being on the list means that you're more likely, or
Yeah, it
yes.
makes us eligible for funding sources. So some of these are all from plans that the city has previously worked on. And for example, the landings one, it was going to go into construction and it got pulled out because Google pulled out of their project, but that doesn't mean that it's not still in our vision for that part of town. So it's still on the list for VTP because it's a much longer time horizon. Shoreline Boulevard, there was a feasibility study a few years ago, 2015. And that's the portion from El Camino to Montecito, and that would be like a road diet. That section is like 6 lanes, 3 in each direction, bus parking. So you can see more if you click on the link. And Ravendale, Ferguson, this one made it to the VTP because it's a big ticket item. It would be like a Bernardo undercrossing type thing between these two areas and leading to the light rail station, which is, not very well connected. It's kind of got freeways nearby. We don't know when that's going to happen. It hasn't made it anywhere near the top of our priorities, but it would be great for it to happen within the time horizon of this long-term plan. And then the one down the bottom is California Street, which is the one that Robert's group is working on right now in terms of the pilot, and what we have in the VTP is the permanent version.
Cool. And then there were 2 projects that needed, they were asking for like the next chunk of funding, and in order to get it, they had to submit these complete streets checklists. And the Diridan Station one could check all the things, and people were supportive. You can read about the details. There were some questions from the public about whether turning one of the streets from having bike lanes to being a bike boulevard was actually an improvement. So that was interesting, but overall had support. There's this light rail extension from Alum Rock Station to the East Ridge Transit Center, which then is along or on Capitol Expressway. And that couldn't check all the boxes because in fact, it wasn't making the streets complete. In 2012, sidewalks were widened to 10 feet. So that part is nice, but because Capitol Expressway is a county road, there wasn't a way to add protected bike lanes. And so there was concern both about the lack of bike lanes and that some of the intersections continue to maybe be risky given the high number of collisions along that corridor. So those were the 2 projects. That's it.
You.
Yes, I have a
Question?
clarifying question,
Okay.
brought up by the Ferguson. Is Permanente Creek Escuela in our long-term plan, or should it be on that list? Would be a similar under overcrossing.
The Bonnie Villa, I call it the Bonnie Villa undercrossing, per Fenric, remember Fenric's suggestion on naming things. Do you remember if it's on the list?
I don't remember. Sorry, these were the ones I emailed you about because I was like, I don't,
I think it would have been one that I submitted, but
Okay,
I didn't look at the list.
I would just say it should have similar
Yes,
status.
yes, yes, it's also expensive.
Hope in the
Yeah.
future, and
Yeah.
we have to be innovative and or expensive and
Yes.
both probably.
And valuable.
Yes.
I guess related to that, I'd also heard of some past project that would, I don't know if this isn't, that would connect the Montaloma neighborhood to the San Antonio shopping area.
Yeah.
That was also.
I think that was
Undercrossing.
submitted by Palo Alto. I don't think that was us.
Oh, okay.
Well, there was a project when that Mayfield Mall now.
Oh, the
Yeah.
Mayfield undercrossing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The housing developer had proposed or endorsed, but because that housing never went in and it was an expensive project, it didn't go forward. Now, there's still a need for connections across, Central, better than what's at the San Antonio train station and all the other little intricacies there. But I don't think that's a project anymore, as far as I remember.
It's not a project in the city, but I seem to remember that it was in a prior VTP. So I'd be interested to see if it rolls over.
Once the housing
Yeah,
developer.
I don't
pulled
have
out,
it
Kind
pulled up, but.
of quiet.
And does the city get feedback about why some projects are selected from the list and not others?
No.
Thank you.
Yes, let's move to public comment. Anybody? Members of the public specifically, want to make a comment about the BTA BPAC updates? Online, in person.
No members of the public have raised their hand.
All right, let's go to committee comments. Any member of the committee want to make any additional comments?
Member Fenwick has raised her hand.
Member Fenwick.
I just want to say thank you for tracking these out for the longer term items in particular. And I do think the tunnel by San Antonio Station to Mayfield Mall was canceled. And that is a crossing I do frequently. And it is one of the few places in the city of Mountain View that when you hit the pedestrian call button, those lights change on Central Expressway. It is very easy to cross. A tunnel would be much safer, but it is really, really easy to cross there. So I'm not too concerned about the San Antonio intersection, but it's good to see the long-term plans and the thoughts going on in BTA. So thank you so much. That's it.
Yes, thank you. It was very detailed. I appreciate the effort of.
And if I could just, comment, yeah, I don't see, I think these were the projects. The only additional one was the Shoreline Boulevard cycle track and bus lane extension. So, yeah.
I think that the transit center is on there as well, right? You see anything about that?
Yes, sorry, it was under transit and not complete streets, yes.
Yeah, and the downtown is there. So there's that Cedar Street corridor means something else, right?
Yeah.
Rude. Okay, the next exciting item on the list is committee/staff announcements. 7.1 staff comments.
Yes, right. That's not it. There it is. And so as we mentioned, there was the Brandon White Transportation Planner. Here to give you staff comments. Bike to Boba event, which you see here with the three photos and then we also had the donuts event, Ride to Mountain View High School event, which went very well. It was well attended. And then work has begun on El Camino Real, and so you can see here the bulb outs being installed on all. They're working from Sunnyvale towards Palo Alto and installing those bulb outs. You can probably go look at one tonight if you really wanted to see. And then here on the right, this last Saturday was the El Camino Real bicycle ride from Santa Clara to Palo Alto. It's very well attended. Over 100 people, maybe over 150 were there to ride and experience El Camino, what it could be. Then just a reminder to everyone that the California Street Survey is still open and you can take it. On May 28th, Chair Isaac Stone will be present with the mayor for the Bike Month proclamation. And then, of course, Bike to Wherever Days on 17, 18, and 19 of this week. And we thank all the BPAC members who were able to make it, have signed up. Thank you very much for doing that. So, and I actually did a couple review 2 months worth of ASCMV reports. So here you have that information there. And everything is fairly standard. I will have some bullet points to talk with you guys about in just a second. And then show you the information on Castro. And we had only one complaint on Castro that the person did not like the new fencing, that it felt too small. And I'll have an exact quote on that in just a second. Right. So in December, we had two people complain that the bike lanes on Evelyn are blocked right at the Hadley building at 555 East Evelyn. Then we had a request for a minor but significant change at Walker and Leon because cars were cutting the there's a curve there and they were cutting it. And so transportation and traffic engineering staff worked together to get flex posts put up to make it so cars cannot cut that. Then notable things for January. There were two cars parked on the sidewalk, two reports of speeding cars being dangerous on the roadway. We did mention today Ringstorfen Junction, and we had a request for improved facilities at Ringstorfen Junction. And then we did get a complaint of cars being parked in the bike lane at Middlefield by Crittenden Middle School. And then the exact words for the Castro complaint was the new structures are boring and too small. And that is all I have for the staff report, and I'm happy to answer any clarifying questions.
Do we have any clarifying questions?
It's the total number of cases is for Castro Streets 1.
Yes. Oh, does it have 0? Yeah, okay, it has 1.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Anonymous.
What is usually blocking the sidewalk?
What is usually blocking the sidewalk are various items. Serious, mattresses, furniture, trees. Part of the category for sidewalk path blocks, I will also put in as when the sidewalk is so cracked that we've got a complaint about it. So that is part of it. It's really varied. The cars aren't always there, and when they are, I bring them up. I don't bring up how many, I don't count how many times a tree blocks it or a mattress blocks it, but that's the bulk of it, is items. So
And what is the typical response to car is parked in the bike lane?
the typical response to the car is parked in, you mean the ask and V response or the city's
Yeah.
overall response?
The ask and view response.
Sure, the typical response is to indicate, to call the non-emergency line so that the police can come out and issue a citation. This last month, no, I don't know if it's last month, but this last week, I had a request about the same building again, actually several. So I checked with the police department on this particular location. And the lead officer in charge of traffic enforcement, traffic enforcement and safety said he's issued by himself, just him, 20 citations to people blocking that specific building. So the police are aware of it, we are aware of it, and we have a grant where we're beginning design work for that section of Evelyn. That will help. It's a small grant, so we'll be looking at just like the concept, but that grant will lead to more grants and save us time now, or save us time in the future, because we'll be ready for that. And in fact, it will help us do a little bit more in the ATP because we can take Evelyn. What we'll take from that grant is we'll plug it directly into the ATP, and then that'll free up some budget in the ATP. So the typical response that I write is, please call the non-emergency line and the police will come out and do something if they're able to at that time and that the person is still there. And I can personally say I've called myself then went in and came back out a couple hours later and seen the citation on someone's windshield. So the police are doing this if they can get there in time.
Is the property commercial, residential?
It's residential.
It's a large relatively new apartment building.
I know.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's an appropriate time to ask. I observed today a cement mixer blocking the bike lane, and normally you would assume that that's a construction project and they got permits, but I did not observe any traffic cones or signs or anything. I didn't do anything, but in the future, would it be safe to assume that if they don't have any traffic cones or signs, then it's not, they didn't get the proper permits and I should call?
I can't answer the first part with any certainty, yay or nay. But if they don't have the traffic cones and signs and safety things, then yes, go ahead and call the non-emergency line.
So this is a related kind of hypothetical. When there's construction ongoing and the pavement is left with plates or what do you call it, cut back temporary patching that's dropped or never filled in sufficiently. Or if they finish their permanent patching and it's just poor, what's the recourse with the contractors? I mean, can the city require them to go out and do the microplaning to get it more level, or what's sufficient safety while they're working and what is sufficient quality when they're done?
I don't know the answer. I think our construction team would have the best answer. I don't know if transportation manager Lowe would like to respond to that.
I was gonna say the same thing, but it's good to call it into Public Works because the construction team can go out and inspect. If they haven't passed their final inspection, then they have more leverage.
So the construction team manager really does care about bicycle issues and bicycle safety.
I mean, it's just not just bicycles, sometimes it's actually roadway or sidewalk
Yeah.
as well, but I've seen construction gaps with, even car tires might be in danger of getting popped if they hit it at the right angle. And it wasn't completed yet, but leaving that for a couple of weeks seems hazardous. And other times I've seen, probably more in other cities, patches that are permanent that I don't know, would have thought they were sufficient to match the current pavement.
Thank you. Thank you. Then seeing no further questions, let's move on to public comment. Any physical or digital people want to comment? Then any committee comments?
I'll briefly say, I do appreciate the update, especially particularly regarding the Evelyn one, and hearing that the city is responding is paying attention to these sorts of issues when patterns arise, and that PD is also responding is helpful. It can be a bit opaque sometimes what the response from the city is. And so hearing updates on when there's patterns of issues and what the response has been is just helpful to understand what's going on. Since I have on multiple occasions, actually both for Evelyn and for other streets, filed these are their basic amounts of someone's parking their bike lane or parked in a bad manner when it's like, I, for whatever reason, couldn't reasonably or didn't want to call the non-emergency line at the time. And it's at the location where I've observed patterns of behavior. So I wanted to get it on the record anyways. And so knowing that there's responses to that is helpful.
Thank you. And next item.
Member Fenwick has
Yes.
raised her hand.
Member comments.
Very similar to Member Cushmal's comment, I do find to have the most impact when I call the non-emergency number for a situation I see that's actively happening, then also filing an Ask Mountain View, particularly if it's something I see reoccurring in the same location. That is, I have found this much as transportation planner White has said, I found that gets the best overall improvement in the time. So thank you for these updates. And my own comment is I like the little barriers that are on Castro. I think they're pretty cute. And I think if they were any bigger, they would overwhelm the space. And that's my only comment on the update. Thank you.
Hey, downtown looks nice. I think they're doing a good job.
Okay, sorry, I'm with the small and boring.
Okay.
Was better before the improvement.
Then you can bring it up in item 7. Any comments?
Keep this going.
I think we don't have any comments.
Member Finwick had her hand up and then she put it down, so.
Oh, sorry. I didn't have any further comments on 7.1. I guess on 7.2, I also don't have any further comments.
Fantastic. Then we will move on to set and dating time for the next meeting, which will be on Wednesday, June 26th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. at this very location. And we will move on to item 10, which is adjournment.
Thank you. Bye.
Member